The topic I'd like to go into today is the topic which we could call the demonization of pain in the mental health industries. If I was going to call it the topic something, I'd call it that. And this is a real big thing if we fail to take account of this business of demonizing pain in mental health. Then we're missing everything. We're shooting in the dark. We're completely clueless if we don't understand the immense significance of this tendency to demonize pain. And it's more than a tendency, it's kind of a default, really. The reason for this default is inevitably because we're looking at the world in a flat way, in a literal way. And what I mean by that is we're looking at the world in such a fashion that stuff is only what it appears to be, so that nice feelings are good and difficult or unpleasant feelings are bad. And there's no nuance to that. That's the whole story. And then we live life on that basis. Now that is definitely the default mode. It's the default mode of all of us. And to live according to that flat, zero perspective kind of a way is what is called the unconscious life. Generally speaking, it's true that very few of us are quite that obtuse. We all know that it's good to be challenged, and we all know that it's counterproductive to run away from difficult situations. That's part of growing up, we know that. But nevertheless, despite the fact that most of us do know that very well, even if we don't always practice it, and that's fair enough. It's okay to know it, and you don't have to practice it every single time. But as a collective, human beings behave differently. As a collective, as a mass mind or generic mind, human beings behave very dumbly, if that's a proper word. Collectives of us always see the world in a literal way. That's another way of saying the collective of us, the mass mind, doesn't have any sense of humour whatsoever. Organisations don't have any sense of humour whatsoever. Naturally, they're organisations. You can't expect an organisation to step up on the stage and do a kind of comedy routine or a stand-up routine like ICI or the NHS or Texaco. It's not going to be very funny. That's okay, because we don't have to rely on corporations or organisations to tell jokes for us. But when we're working in a collective of people in the healthcare system, we have this truly dreadful situation where everyone pretty much has to agree with each other, because you can't have people, or it seems as if we can't have people going this way and going that way and strike an hour as they will. There's an immense conformity, which is known as regulation rather than conformity, but there's a lot of regulations, and we necessarily conform to the regulations, so it doesn't matter which way you put it, it's the same thing. And the effect of that is that whatever the current paradigm is, or the current guiding model for our therapeutic activity and for our way of dealing with people with mental health conditions, we become very dogmatic about it. It's almost impossible not to be dogmatic about it. And so, rather than waffling on endlessly on this point, what I'm basically trying to say is that, organizationally speaking, healthcare industry type speaking, we demonize pain. And all of our strategies are based on eliminating or reducing pain. So naturally, all of our so-called coping skills are to take us out of this zone of being majorly challenged into a zone where we're not so challenged and not so much under pressure and not in so much emotional pain. All coping strategies are little routes out of the crisis zone into a safe harbour of somewhere where there isn't as much challenge going on, where there isn't so much pain. Self-soothing, which is a kind of popular kind of a notion in recent times, is exactly the same thing. And this corresponds to Gurdjieff's evil inner god of self-calming. And I prefer the term, even though it is long-winded and cumbersome, the evil inner god of self-calming, because it spells it out a bit better. So we have this impulse and we sit on it or squash it or make it go away. Now, obviously, we don't want to do that with creative impulses, but we don't really want to do it with any impulses, even ones which are stupid, in the sense of they don't represent an insight, they just represent me probably going to say something stupid or be mean to someone or be mean to myself. We can't repress impulses like that because they come back with extra force later on. They bring their cousins along with them as well. We can feel them. We don't have to act on them, and if we do, well, that can happen too, but we can feel them. And once we have felt whatever the impulse is, that's it, because the impulse has been felt. It's not going to keep knocking on our door. It's not going to come back time and time again like a repeat TV program. So the culture, the kind of fashion, because it is all just fashion, really. People copy each other because they think, well, it must be right because all of them over there are doing it. That's exactly how we are in the mental health care world. We're looking around and seeing what's going down, and we're doing it too. And we're shit scared to question it. But this whole business of steering away from pain and trying to find solutions, solution-focused therapy. What the hell is a solution? A solution is whatever challenging crisis is going on, I want to go back to what I know and what is safe and what is not going to disturb me so much. And that is totally, totally understandable. And for anyone, for all of us, when we're going through stuff like that, we want it to stop. That's understood. But just because we want it to stop, and we can't help wanting it to stop, and we can't help trying to get out of it if we can, doesn't mean that we can't have a higher level of awareness that this is not a malign process. That just because I can have the awareness, that just because I am deeply unwilling to go through the process that I'm going through, and I can also have an awareness that I am going to go through it anyway, one way or another, and I can also have the awareness that this isn't a bad thing, it's not a pathology. So all of those go together, and that's fine. So what this all comes down to is, I would say, our societal or our cultural fear of anything that isn't on the map, that is strange, that is challenging, that is weird. Because without any doubt, as a collective, we don't like any of those things. We don't like strange, we don't like weird, we don't like different, we don't like... and we just like what we like, and we just like... It's like a person who goes to a restaurant and they always just get what they like because that's what they like, so they get it, which is fair enough. But that doesn't happen to be something we can do in life. We can try to do it, and we're totally free to try to do it as much as we possibly can, and say, well, I like this and I'm going to just keep on doing this because I like it. Or even maybe I don't like it particularly, but this is comfortable to me, so I'll keep on doing this, thanks very much, I won't try that other thing over there. And we are free to do that, but it's not possible to do that in life. And this is the most fundamental principle in psychology and in therapy, I would say. And it's the principle that we cannot get away with living life the way we want to. And I know it's possible to argue with that. Having just said that, I know it is possible to argue with it, because you can point at people who seem to have done just that. So we just have to make an exception for those people who do seem to get by without, quite happily just doing with the same outlook the whole of their lives. But nevertheless, we can see that there is the operation of this principle, which on the whole, what this principle does is that it means that if we do try to live our lives within a certain secluded zone and not be explorative, be conservative instead, which is a huge human tendency. We all have this tendency to stick to the known and be conservative and fear the new. As Robert Anton Wilson says, we have this immense tendency to be neophobic, which is a very stupid tendency, but it's human, it's very human. But we also have the tendency to be curious and to wonder and to be excited by the prospect of radical change and something new. And we have that as well. It just doesn't get as much airtime, really. So the principle that I'm skirting around says that if we do live life in such a way that we just stick to what we know and are comfortable with and familiar with, and what everyone else will agree with us about, to say, yes, this is and this and that's that, i.e. if we stay within the domain of the known, then what happens is that our life, so-called life, in the domain of the known becomes less and less enjoyable until it reaches a point where there's no joy in it. And then it kind of goes below that level, and it becomes grating, it becomes horrendous, it becomes an ordeal with no end in sight. So the meaningfulness of what we're doing in life goes, and then to live out, to enact the pattern of our lives without any meaning to it means there's no real motivation to do it, and it means there's no joy to be had from doing it. But we have to do it all the same. We have to enact a routine of our life just the same, because what else are we going to do? Even if I refuse to do anything and just sit there, then I've got the routine of me refusing to do anything, and that is a routine because it's a reaction to a routine. And so trying to run away from a routine is also a routine. I'm stuck in a saying no routine in my head, or whatever dialogue narrative I've got going on in my head. So what this principle means is that we can't take the easy way out. We can't ignore the fact that the universe is far larger and far stranger than we could ever imagine. Because if we do, the little bit of the universe that we've sanitized becomes intolerably inhospitable to us, and it becomes such a torture that it really does become impossible to live it. At some point or other, it becomes untenable to carry on living in that sanitized version of life. Now, it might seem that in saying all of this, I'm going off track a bit, because for the last 4 or 5 episodes, I've been trying to tie everything together with fairy tales. And so this might seem like we've gone off at a bit of a tangent. But that's not the case, because all that I'm doing here is reiterating what Joseph Campbell said in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So without coming at it in any sort of a medical or mental health care type direction, but coming at it from the direction of world mythology and fairy tales and folklore and all the rest of it, this is the central piece that comes out of Joe Campbell's work, the idea of the hero's journey, which I won't talk about particularly, because there's such a huge amount of stuff about the hero's journey on the internet. But apart from to say that the hero's journey is when we venture forth out of the domain of the known, the sanitized version, or as both Joe Campbell and Anthony DeMello put it, out of the playpen of the known, the world that we make for ourselves. So we're in this playpen for adults, and that's called society. And we might think it's all very great to be in society or in the social world, or we might think society is great and that we're also great to be in it, if we're kind of managing to achieve by society's standards. If we're not, then we won't feel so great. But no matter what we think we've achieved within society, and what steps we've made, and what great ventures we've undertaken, we're only piddling around in the playpen for adults, in the adult playpen. So when you see that, it kind of takes the shine off our accomplishment, really, because it doesn't account for anything, really, no matter what you do in the playpen. It's fine to be in a playpen at a certain stage, but when you get to be 40, 50, or whatever, time to leave the playpen, maybe even earlier, maybe 20, it's time to leave the playpen, and to start involve this, collude with each other to create this fantasy that there's valuable attainments, valuable opportunities for self-development and self-growth within the playpen, which is what society does, is frankly, I mean, it's just not, doesn't really hold water, really, does it? It doesn't really wash. It's the playpen. Don't matter what you do in the playpen, whether you're a good guy in the playpen or a bad guy in the playpen or whatever. So when we ignore that core that comes from outside of the playpen, and we ignore our own innate curiosity and desire for adventure, then, according to Joseph Campbell, we get caught up in the negative adventure, the adventure which is nothing else but boredom and grinding futility. Not much of an adventure, but it's a negative adventure. It's a reversed adventure. It's the flip side of the adventure, or the adventure turned upside down. And this corresponds to a saying of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. It corresponds very well indeed, where Jesus says, if you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is within you, what is within you will destroy you. So there Jesus is saying, a couple of thousand years previously, exactly what Joseph Campbell is saying. and there's no real leeway there. We don't have the freedom to piddle about in the playpen and make out to ourselves that we're doing good. We don't have that freedom. Only in our collective imagination do we have that freedom. Okay, thanks for watching.